Like a lot of Minecraft players, I play on a realm that I don't own, which means that once the realm's gone, that's it. And so I decided to record what I was doing just so I can have proof that I've done it and save that memory without trying to get the world file and go through the mess of that. I got on this realm with one friend I actually know and everybody else is a stranger, and it took a while to get a little used to it, but eventually I started working. I decided to do some terraforming because it's kind of what I've been interested in. The town that this realm is sitting on is surrounded on about half of it is a canyon. And I decided, hey, I'm going to change this up. Make it so the town is set apart from the surrounding area. And I immediately got to work on it after getting permission from the owner because I knew that this would be a big project. I didn't want to step on anybody's toes, and he said, go for it. So I started working. So none of my recordings are in any particular order. I just recorded bits and pieces here and there. It wasn't like I was trying to chronologically order it, and which means you'll see already at the start there's quite a bit down. The first side that you don't really see until later on, I just placed deep slate on top of the grass, which I found made it look bulky. It looked bad. But starting fresh on the other side, this is where a lot of, I think, the best side ended up being. It makes sense because where I'm standing, I'm on the town, so I want the outside to look the best just because that's how the realm town is going to look at it. First step is just taking down all the trees. Some classic deforestation right here. The second step was to dig the grass. Like I said, I originally on the other side didn't do this and just placed the deep slate on top of the grass, and then it made it look bulky. Over here, I tried to dig the dirt out just to get a little more of a base. I collected a lot of dirt. I don't know what I'm going to do with all this dirt, but I collected it. And I had to go through a lot of shovels. And I'll explain. I thankfully had a lot of diamonds from mining deep slate, so it wasn't much of a concern at all to be making diamond shovels. So I'd make the shovel, go up to my enchanting table, hope it's a good enchantment, and go from there. And I think I went through about 4 or 5 shovels, and I'm not wasting my time with mending. I did have mending on my pickaxe because that one I was not gonna waste my time enchanting every time. So I continued just digging the dirt all the way around. I worked on about half of the mountain because this was the side that is the least populated of the town, and I knew that what I was doing was entirely experimental, which meant I didn't want to have a disaster on somebody else's turf. So most of this is just focusing on my area. The next part I'd have to be very careful and conscientious of my fellow realm players. The digging portion honestly didn't take that long. This was probably the most expensive on tools, just because I was going through so many shovels. I knew it was important to get down to like the bare bones of the cliff. So as you can see, made some progress. It's just digging one side of it, really exposing it down to the bedrock of the cliff. And now I have to take this all the way around. The next step in the project was to actually start placing down the blocks. I went with deep slate for a very specific reason. A little bit of an inspiration for the build. I knew I wanted to replicate the coast of Oregon in the US. It's very volcanic, and it's got these amazing cliffs and very dark rock, but it's also very green and lush because of the moisture, and so a ton of moss. And I really wanted to use that because we now have pale moss, and I really wanted to use that in that way. And here was an opportunity, which meant the materials I needed were dark colors. The Oregon coast also has a lot of lighter rocks too, but I was focusing on more the volcanic cliffs than the sandstone beaches. I have visited Oregon, which is why I knew about it, but I just went through pictures that I have, memories that I have, and then pictures on Pinterest and the internet and stuff to just get an idea of what I was kind of looking for. It's not that similar. It's more I was taking the color scheme than the actual structure of the rocks, because if I was doing that, then I'd be definitely shaping the entire cliffside more. And a big difference between the Oregon coast and what I'm doing is this isn't a coastline, this is a canyon. It's inspiration from real life without replicating real life, I guess. Requiring dark blocks meant I had a limited options for the dark blocks, and I just chose deep slate because that's one of the easiest to get early mid-game. And frankly, I didn't have a whole lot when I first started this project when it came to supplies and diamonds and stuff, and I figured, okay, I'll just go down to the bottom of the world and just start strip mining. That way I can get both diamonds and deep slate. My tactic for placing the deep slate was just place it against the stone. I wasn't going to pack it up like the dirt originally was there. And then I just smoothed it out a bit, just in some places where it's kind of choppy, kind of messy. I really followed the train of the Minecraft generation, because there wasn't a whole lot bad with it. There were a few caves that I chose to cover up, but some caves I left open and used that to make shadows and create some interesting depth to the cliff. I did have to build around some of my current stuff and some of my friends' stuff, but it wasn't too bad, and at this stage in the project, it looked really rough, and I had to really hurry because I'm guessing my realm buddies were probably wondering what I was doing at this stage, because I would do a little bit of digging and then I would do a little bit of deep slate. Like I said, I didn't do it in any particular order, and I didn't feel like doing it in any particular order. I just did it. I wasn't worried about shading or anything like that right now. I just wanted the base done. It's kind of like when you're painting and you paint your background first. If you're painting a landscape that's predominantly sky, you paint it blue. Essentially, that's what I'm doing. Before I add anything else, I just want the base down. This process took the longest just because of the amount of deep slate I had to mine. And again, my realm buddies are probably not too happy with the fact that there's just a giant crater underneath our town because I was mining so much. And this is why I decided to get mending on my pickaxe, because I just did not want to bother with continually making new pickaxes, trying to enchant them. I wanted a good pickaxe and just have it. I did run into a lot of problems at this stage with the pickaxe. I had mending, but I needed a way to mend it, and Bedrock isn't great when it comes to the offhand. It's not like Java where I can just offhand and then have an easy way of mending it. Here I have to collect the XP and then let it switch to my pickaxe so then it repairs. And that was a terrible process. With the base done, made with deep slate, I could go on to the shading and stuff like that, but I really wasn't feeling it. And plus the transition between the top of the cliff and the underwater part of the cliff it looked really bad and it was bothering me. So what I did, I ended up using that dirt that I didn't think I was going to use. And I just started going underwater, placing it. I didn't go all the way down because it was incredibly deep and I just didn't want to deal with that. So I only placed to a certain point and only really replaced sand. I replaced the gravel if it was towards the top. Meanwhile, I'm doing all this and there's a ton of drowns that are attacking me and it's super obnoxious. I did get a trident, which I guess is cool. This isn't my world where I'm making a ton of farms where I need the trident for the trident killers, but yeah, I'll find a use for it. So once I got all the dirt down, I like to go through and then just turn it all into mud. I've done this in my other world and another realm I'm in. I just like the look of mud underwater. It looks cool, I think. And that part's fairly easy and I actually don't mind it. I think it looks good. The part where I'm an absolute genius with Minecraft is I had the ability to use a brewing stand. Me being the genius I am, only thought of making potion of water breathing probably at the last 8 minutes that I was working on it, which meant I used a total of 1 potion for this project when I could have been using it since the beginning of this part of the project, the underwater part. At least I learned my lesson and hopefully next time I will remember to do that. I still can't believe that I just didn't think of it, because I had pufferfish as well, because my early game food source was fish. It's one of those things where you look back and went, if I could change one thing, it would be using water breathing. It would have saved a lot of time. I spent a lot of time trying not to drown. So, yeah. The next step of the process was to create shadows and just other features on the mountain, on the cliffside, to make it less boring. I started out just laying out a bunch of blocks that I could easily obtain and see what worked, where the gradient was, and I kind of settled on black stone, tiled deep slate, and 2 different basalts. And the deep slate, obviously easy to get. I've already gone through loads of it. I had no problem going and getting more. The black stone, fairly simple. Just had to find patches in the nether. Thankfully, some of my realm buddies, they have already gone netherite mining, so all I had to do was go into one of their tunnels and look for the black stone. So that was pretty easy. And then the basalt, that one was a little trickier because there was no way I was mining a basalt delta. Those things are dangerous. And I knew basalt generators are pretty simple to make. And so I was like, oh, sure, I'll build it. But then I ran into an issue with getting the ice, and that became a whole disaster. I was starting to get to the point where I needed a silk touch pickaxe, and I needed 30 levels to do that. And so I spent a lot of time mining. I bred a lot of animals. I killed a lot of animals. I did all the things you do early game to get XP, and it was so slow. So I decided to try different ways to get XP, and they all failed a lot. I was so close to having 30 levels. I think I got up to 28, and then I perished and lost them all, and I was so frustrated. And finally I just said, you know what, forget it. I'm building an XP farm. I went probably over 500 blocks in the nether to get blaze rods and blaze powder, just so I could brew some potions, infesting potions, so I could make the XP farm. That was probably the point in the project where I was like, I don't think this is worth it. I wanna quit. I don't want to do this anymore. But I stuck with it. I built my XP farm and finally got that Silk Touch pickaxe. I wasn't filming for any of that because I was thinking, oh, this is boring work. Once I obtained the pickaxe, I was able to create the generator and just mine as much as I wanted, and it was no big deal. I was free to start actually building. So I really focused on, again, the natural terrain where there's overhangs. Okay, try to create a shadow by putting black stone at the deepest parts and then some of the tile. And I just did that for every overhang, every cave, to really exaggerate the shadows. And I did it for the natural bridge that I had made, which I haven't mentioned so far, but I made a natural bridge. Working on the shadows of the natural bridge wasn't the safest thing in the world, and it didn't always end up well. And then I went through and just dug out patches of the deep slate and put in the basalt, kind of just make it more patchy looking. There was really no purpose other than the fact that it adds a little bit. You can honestly barely see it in this video just because 30 frames per second does not show much, but it really adds something even though you can't immediately pick it out. What I started working on next was to add inclusions, just because having the shadows wasn't enough. It was still pretty bland. I went through block palette and I decided on having two different types of intrusions, one being tough and then the other being granite and dripstone. And with the two of them, I kind of just spread them around. No real pattern. Made some big, some small. Really just varied it. And at this point, it did look kind of funky. It looked kind of off. But again, we're at the stage where it's not completed, and which meant I had to keep going. Even though I didn't think it looked that great, I had to just go, okay, moving on to the next step and hope it looks good later. The final step of the process was actually the step I started first of this entire thing, which was the moss. I knew that I wanted to use the pale moss and regular moss, and built the moss farm, collected a ton of it, and meanwhile, to get both types of moss, I had to wait for the wandering trader to bring by each one. I started taking a look at the pale moss and the moss, and I was trying to think, okay, which color am I going to use? Eventually I decided I'm going to use both, because I discovered that mossy cobblestone is a great in-between of the two. And so I started just working on these patches of moss and pale moss and the mossy cobblestone. It started coming together. I at first was pretty light placing it, but then I just really allowed myself to go crazy with it. Patches where it was flatter, where you'd have more moss instead of a vertical side. And I also put the moss on the rim of the canyon. That still doesn't look super great, but that's just because nothing is done with beyond the rim. And then what I did was I took the mossy carpet of both variants and placed that around, mostly using the pale moss because that has a good blend for going between the pale moss and then the deep slate. The hitboxes are really weird on that block though. And then the final thing to do for this cliff is just to make it safe, which meant I had to bone meal a lot of glow lichen. With the moss farm, there was no shortage of bone meal, but then I had to wait until night and just run around placing glow lichen. I never got to the point of completely lighting it up. However, I slowly over time, over the last month, because I finished this back in January, I have slowly been adding more and then doing the torch trick, put a torch and then put a carpet over it. So at the end of this, I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. I think it looks pretty cool. I was doubting it a lot in the middle, really questioning why I was doing it, but I think it turned out. I mean, it's my second ever big terraforming project, so for that, I don't think it's that bad. However, it is not finished, and I was thinking, okay, I can get to the other side of the river at some point, it'll be fine. And then I looked at an actual map of the river. I thought I had done half of it. No, I've probably done a third. I don't know when I'm going to get to the rest of it because that was a lot of work and a lot of resources. But eventually I'll get to it, I hope. And another issue I ran into, there's one of the realm buddies who isn't a big fan of it and who actually lives along the cliff, so I don't want to intrude on his space. I think the plan is going forward is to blend it in more. Even though the cliff actually gets steeper, I'm going to try to blend in the moss more, so there's less deep slate, more moss. That way, it's up to the other members to decide what they want. But for the most part, they all think it's fine, and I've honestly completely moved on. Like I said, I did this a month ago, procrastinated ever editing a video, and I've moved on to another project that I'm really excited about. I've been expanding my own personal base of my observatory, and I've started expanding it into different labs and stuff, and so I'm pretty excited about that. But anyway, I just really enjoyed this project. Excited to start working on some new stuff. So yeah, yay.